Do you know that trees wake up for winter? That's what we're going to talk about today. Hi, this is Jill from the North Woods, discovering nature right outside our front door. Trees don't sleep like animals do. We all have ways of surviving winter. We humans put on fat and we survive the lean times of winter, according to all of mankind's history. But trees do something that's a little bit differently. They go more into what is called dormancy, slow motion survival. It's not really a sleep. And they do this to conserve energy, essentially, is the bottom line of it, because winter, there's not ways of getting energy like there is in summertime. And so what they will do is that they will drop their leaves, in the case in the North Woods. They also will pause any sort of leaf growth. It is not entirely off, but it's going to be much slower. The tree goes into slow motion. And essentially, the changes inside is that, first of all, water is pulled out of the cells to prevent freezing, because if they're on the outside of those tree areas, the trees are just going to get frozen and damaged in winter. Sugars and proteins increase to act like a natural antifreeze. And then there's a hormone. I didn't know trees had hormones, but they have a hormone that enforces this dormancy. And so they're trying to just conserve itself, protect itself during this harsh winters. And even you can hear trees crackle a bit as winter is going on. And that is typically the water inside of the trees cracking. But trees that have high sugar contents are less likely to crack. So there's two types of different dormancies that they have. One of them is called endodormancy, which is true dormancy, and that is triggered by internal hormones. It's not the weather. So the trees can't even grow if the conditions are right. You have a very warm winter, it's very sunny. The trees are just like, nope, not going to start growing. I'm not going to put myself in danger. That's a hormonal. Then there's ecodormancy, which is the weather type of dormancy, and that means that the chilling temperature tells the trees to hold off. It's waiting for that warmth in spring. It's waiting to decide when to burst out in buds, and it's waiting for a certain temperature. So those are the two kinds of dormancies they have. And yesterday, Em and I went hiking. We went bird watching, and there were a number of trees that were just busting out in leaves. And it was just fun to watch because we would walk throughout the entire area. And as the day warmed up more and more buds on the trees started popping out. And trees themselves even are expecting a certain number of days of cold temperatures before they'll even wake up. Like I said, you can have false springs. You can have warm winter days. There have been days where I've gone skiing where in the morning the snow was great. It was wonderful. And by the time the afternoon came down, it was like 60 degrees in the middle of January. And then it's just a quick day. It's not going to stay that way. And so scientists are looking at the temperatures, trying to determine temperatures at the core of the earth, looking at how the sap flows, time-lapse cameras so that they can speed it up and see the actual actions. Leaves and branches droop slightly at night during growing season, but also in winter itself. So the trees alter their energy use so that they know when to do that. And even during this dormancy, trees still respond to moonlight, changing when the moon is fully bright. And even though growth is paused, even though that they're in that dormancy, the sap is slowed, they still have sensors on and they still recognize when there's light at night. And there's a lot of animals that depend on this too. There are animals living in the trunks of trees. The dense bark gives them protection from the outside world, and the bugs are inside underneath the bark, inside the galls waiting to wake up, even in their dormancy, helping protect the animals and bugs around them. And partially too, like I said, it's not all entirely weather or daylight. The trees have an expectation. They build hormones at a certain point. But the part that is the ectodormancy, there are photoreceptors that look for light, longer days, the temperature receptors know when it's getting warmer, and we're converting over into not just a warm day, not just a false spring, but a real spring. And they also require a certain number of temperature before they'll break out of that weather dormancy. So you could kill a tree if they came out too soon. The buds then will start to activate. The tree buds themselves, some of them have like a natural antifreeze to them, and that protects them against maybe a surprise frost that happens. We have had frost up here in June where all the trees are budded out. They have a waxy piece to them and some protection from those quick freezes. Then, when the tree is starting to come out of dormancy, the sap starts moving up from the roots. The roots are the very first thing that start waking up. They start pulling in more nutrients, more water again. The spring snow and rain starts to feed the roots, and then the sap starts flowing. That's why we get that maple syrup. You get different kinds of maple syrup, if you didn't know that, at different times of the year. That first batch of maple syrup tends to be buttery, tends to be a little bit more watery, while later in the year it gets darker and more amber. It's not so much when you see different types of maple syrup in the store, this one's light, this one's dark. It might not be different trees, it's just different times. You'll even see sometimes birches, walnuts, sycamore trees. They have tappable sap too, but sometimes they can bleed sap. You might see sap coming in on the outside of a tree, and you even might see critters. I have seen squirrels and chipmunks licking that kind of sap right from the tree itself. So sap is a good piece of energy for the tree, but it's also for the animals around it. And then inside of each bud, there is a miniature leaf or a flower or both. The buds start to swell with the sap pressure as it's coming in, getting warmer, and the leaves and the flower inside them grow. And then at one point they burst. And then that is when we are leafed out. We're flowering if we're an early spring flowering tree. And they know, like I said, they are knowing when it is they're supposed to wake up. There are hormones that are part of the tree's wake up motion. I didn't even know, like I said, that trees had hormones, but they absolutely do. And these hormones are there to signal the tree is time to wake up out of that one dormancy. And we also know that there are some trees that are early to come out of it. I already see the willows. I already see my silver maple. There's willows out there that I've seen, and alder trees that leaf out very quickly. While oaks, hickory trees, walnut trees tend to be a little bit later. I have a black walnut tree on this side of the house. It is still not coming out because they're more susceptible to frost damage. So they're trying to delay that growing season in case there's a late frost. So you have to take bets, and the different breeds are differently susceptible to cold. Sometimes you might see some external ways that you can see that the tree is waking up. The buds on the trees will start to swell. I can see that through binoculars out my back window. You will see growth on birches and elders. Hazels will get little tiny red flowers on them. And you might even see places where the bark is breaking on trees as twigs are coming out. The tree could even potentially sweat a little bit as that internal thawing starts happening. So I don't know if you put your hand on the bark, you could feel it happening. I have never tried this, but I'm going to start trying it now. I wish I would have tried it yesterday. You might notice, too, that the evergreens, they don't ever quite sleep that same way. They have a completely different winter survival plan, which we'll talk about someday. And as I saw yesterday when I was out walking around, the fungi that lives on the sides of trees, they're greening up. They were sort of pale and pallid. They are greening up. They're starting to grow up. They're starting to branch out a little bit. I mentioned before that some trees have more of an antifreeze type of property to them. And some of it, again, has to do with the amount of sugars. Higher sugar trees have more resistance to freezing in them. They can handle that super cooling without turning to ice. There's proteins that will bind to the tiny ice crystals that prevent them from growing bigger and damaging the cells. And then there's even other solutions inside of there, like I said, the sugar that will keep the cells from freezing. So it's sort of like an antifreeze. Like sugar maples can survive down to minus 40 degrees. They use this super cool high sugar concentration to prevent that ice crystals from forming on the inside. It's ice crystals that damage our roads. It's the ice crystals that are going to damage the trees too. So they have techniques to prevent the ice crystals from getting very large and growing inside of the trees. So I hope that helps you understand what's happening with the trees right now. Right now it's spring. Like I said, I got out for a long hike with them, and we noticed that the trees were coming out. They're budding out. The fungus were coming back onto the sides of the trees, and the bugs are starting to come out. So spring is really here, but trees go through a process too. It's not just the animals. So my challenge to you is go out there and see how trees are now coming to life again. Let's say waking up from this winter slumber. See what you can notice that's different about the trees than maybe just a few weeks ago. All right, everyone, I appreciate you listening and watching this podcast. And remember, I just brought this to YouTube. I hope you're discovering and learning more about nature right outside your front door. Thanks so much. Have a great day.